My name is Margaret. I'm 66 years old, and my own daughter accidentally sent me a voice message that was meant for her husband. What I heard about myself in that audio made me leave the very next morning with a plan she would never see coming. "Ricardo, I can't take having my mother in this house anymore." I heard my daughter Grace's voice with a coldness that froze my blood. "She's a nuisance.
She gets into everything. And on top of that, we're already spending so much money on her, I've been looking into some cheap places. I found one that only costs $800 a month." In that moment, I felt as if the floor had opened up beneath my feet. This was the same daughter for whom I had worked day and night cleaning other people's houses. The same one for whom I paid for college by selling even my jewelry. The same one who cried in my arms when Richard left her at the altar the first time, and I spent my last savings to convince him to come back. But the audio continued, and what came next was even worse. "Also, I've already checked the house papers. It's in her name, but I found a way to transfer it to our name without her realizing. My cousin Carol, who works at the county clerk's office, is going to help me." My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped the phone. My own daughter was planning to steal my house, the only thing of value I had in this world, the house I built brick by brick with the sweat of my hands, working 12 hours a day for 30 years. But what hurt the most was hearing her laugh at the end of the message. "In a month, Mom will be in the home and we'll own everything. We can finally live in peace without that bitter old woman controlling us." If you have ever felt the most profound betrayal from someone you love, you'll know exactly what I felt at that moment. But what my daughter Grace didn't know is that her mother isn't as naive as she thinks. And after 66
years in this world, I've learned that sometimes the only way to defend yourself is with the same cunning that's used against you. I couldn't sleep a minute that night. At dawn, I got up with a determination I hadn't felt in years. I put on my most elegant crimson suit, gathered all my important documents, and left the house with a smile on my lips and a plan that would change everything forever. To understand why what I heard hurt so much, I need to tell you how I became the woman I am today, and how my relationship with Grace became the most important thing in my life. I grew up in a family where love was measured by the sacrifices you made for others. My mother, may she rest in peace, worked as a seamstress from 5 o'clock in the morning until 10 at night to support me and my 3 siblings. We never had much money, but we always had love, respect, and strong values. "Margaret," my mother would say to me while teaching me to sew, "in this life, the only thing that matters is family, and for family, you give everything to the last drop of blood." When I got pregnant with Grace at 18, her father disappeared as if by magic. One night, he was there promising we were going to get married, and the next morning, he was gone. His parents slammed the door in my face when I went to look for him, telling me their son wasn't going to ruin his future for some random girl. That's when my mother showed me what she was made of. "That child is going to have everything we couldn't," she told me, hugging me and drying my tears. "We'll raise her together so she can be a good woman." My mother sold her only 2 gold bracelets, the only jewelry she had, to buy me everything I needed for the baby. When Grace was born, it was as if an angel had been born. She was the most beautiful baby I had ever seen, with her big eyes and a smile that lit up the whole room. My mother and I took turns caring for her while I worked. I started cleaning houses at 19, earning barely $20 a day. But every cent I earned was for her. I vividly remember the first day I took Grace to kindergarten. We walked because we didn't have money for the bus, but she wore her uniform perfectly ironed and her shoes shined. The other mothers arrived in fancy cars, dressed in expensive clothes, and I felt small in my patched-up dress and with my calloused hands. But when Grace kissed me on the cheek and said, "Thank you, Mom, you're the best in the world," I knew it was all worth it. The years passed, and my routine was always the same. Wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, prepare breakfast for Grace, take her to school, work cleaning 3 different houses until 6 o'clock in the evening, pick her up, help her with homework, and put her to bed with a story. On weekends, I did laundry to earn extra money, all so she could have a better life than mine. My mother passed away when Grace was 8, but before she left, She made me a promise I will never forget. Margaret, that child is your greatest treasure. Give her an education, give her love, and she will take care of you when you're old. Our family's blood is good. She won't fail you. Those words gave me the strength to keep going, even when the days were so hard that I wanted to give up. When Grace turned 15, I worked extra days for 6 months to give her the party she deserved. I spent $3,500 on that celebration, money I had been saving to fix our leaky roof. But seeing the look on her face that night, watching her shine in her golden dress as she danced, was priceless. "Mom, I don't know how you give me so much when you have almost nothing," she told me that night while hugging me. "When I grow up, I'm going to give all this back to you, multiplied by 1,000. Throughout high school, Grace was an exemplary student. She had the best grades in her class, participated in school plays, and all the teachers told me she had a brilliant future ahead of her. But keeping up with those studies wasn't cheap. Books, uniforms, field trips, it all cost money I didn't have. I started cleaning a fourth house on Sundays, my only day off, just to be able to pay for it all. When it was time to enroll her in college, the cost was $15,000 a year. I was only earning $400 a month cleaning houses. I did the math, and it was impossible. But a mother does the impossible for her children. I took out a loan using my house as collateral. I sold the only engagement ring her father had given me before he left, and I even sold my mother's sewing machine. "My daughter," I told Grace the day I took her to enroll, "I couldn't go to college, but you are going to be a professional. You'll have a degree. You'll work in an office with air conditioning, and you'll never have to clean other people's houses like your mother." That day I cried with happiness, watching my daughter sign the enrollment papers for her business administration degree. For all 4 years of college, I continued to work like crazy to pay for all her expenses. Grace needed money for books, for projects, to go out with her friends, for appropriate clothes for presentations. I gave her everything, even if it meant I had to eat beans and tortillas for a whole week to save money. When she graduated, it was the proudest day of my life. Seeing my daughter walk onto the stage in her cap and gown, hearing them call her name, and the ovation from the crowd was as if all my sacrifices had been worth it. After the ceremony, she hugged me, crying, and said, "Mom, this is as much yours as it is mine. I would never have made it here without you. I promise you that now that I'm a professional, you will never have to suffer again." A year later, Grace met Richard at her job. At first, I was so happy because I saw her so content and in love. Richard seemed like a good guy. He had a stable job as a supervisor at a factory, and he treated my daughter well. When he officially asked for her hand, I cried with emotion, thinking that Grace would finally have the stable family I could never give her. But organizing the wedding was another huge financial sacrifice. Grace wanted an elegant celebration like the ones in magazines. She said, "The venue cost $8,000, the dress $2,000, the music $800, the flowers $600. In total, I spent $10,000 on that wedding. Money I got by taking out another loan and selling the last of my remaining jewelry. The first years of their marriage were beautiful. Grace and Richard would come to visit me every Sunday. We would have dinner together, and she always helped me with the house expenses. "Mom, now that I'm working, I want to take care of you the way you took care of me," she would say while giving me money for groceries. I finally felt that my sacrifices had paid off, that I had a grateful daughter who truly loved me. But everything changed 3 years ago when Richard lost his job and they started having financial problems. They began to constantly ask me for money, and as always, I couldn't say no. First, it was $1,000 for monthly expenses, then $2,500 for a down payment on a new car, then $3,000 to pay off credit card debts. Every dahan, Hing began to change subtly after I lent them that $3,000 for their debts. At first, there were small details that I justified in my mind, thinking they were a result of the stress from their financial problems. But now, after hearing that message, I understand it wasn't stress. It was the beginning of a calculated plan to push me out of their lives. The first sign was when they stopped coming on Sundays. "Mom, we're so busy with Richard's new job," Grace would tell me on the phone. "You know how it is. We need to show we're responsible." I understood, or at least I thought I did. After all, it was natural for a young couple to want to focus on getting ahead. But then the excuses for not answering my calls started. I would call in the mornings and Grace would say, "Mom, I'm in an important meeting. I'll call you later." I'd call in the afternoons. "Oh, Mom, I'm at the grocery store doing our weekly shopping." At night, "Mom, it's too late. We're having dinner. We'll talk tomorrow." That tomorrow never came. And when we finally did talk, the conversation barely lasted 5 minutes. Then came the hurtful comments disguised as concern. "Mom, Richard says he's noticed you've been very forgetful lately," she told me one day during one of our rare phone calls. "Are you sure you can live alone in that big house? At your age, anything could happen." I laughed nervously, thinking they were exaggerating, but the seed of doubt had already been planted. One afternoon, I decided to visit them without warning, bringing them the pineapple dessert that Richard loved so much. When I knocked on the door, I heard laughter and voices inside, but it took them almost 5 minutes to open it. "Oh, Mom, what a surprise," Grace said with a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We were just organizing some work papers." Inside was her cousin, Carol, the one who worked at the county clerk's office, with a bunch of documents scattered on the kitchen table. When they saw me come in, Carol quickly gathered all the papers and stuffed them into a folder. "Hello, Aunt Margaret," she greeted me with that fake smile she had always had. I was just helping Grace with some of Richard's health insurance paperwork. But I managed to catch a glimpse of my name on one of those documents before Carol hid it. "Why do you need papers with my name on them?" I asked with genuine curiosity. Grace and Carol exchanged a look that I didn't know how to interpret at the time, but which I now understand perfectly. "It's just to update the beneficiaries on the insurance. Mom," Grace told me, "you know, in case something happens to us, you're our only family." That explanation calmed me down at the time, but later I started to notice that whenever I mentioned the subject, Grace would quickly change the conversation. "Mom, why don't you tell me about the garden?" She would say, "Oh, Mom, did you see the new show that's on Channel 5? It was then that the deliberate forgetfulness started. They would invite me to lunch, and when I arrived at the restaurant, they weren't there. "Oh, Mom, we forgot to tell you we had to cancel," they would say later. "Richard had a work emergency." This happened 3 times in 2 months. The 4th time it happened, I was left sitting alone in that restaurant for an hour, feeling like a fool. While other families all around me enjoyed their meals together, they also started excluding me from important family events. I found out by chance, talking to my neighbor, Miss Rose, that they had had a barbecue to celebrate Richard's birthday. "How strange you Weston. Aren't there, Margaret?" Miss Rose told me. "I saw them buying meat for like 20 people at the supermarket." When I asked Grace why I hadn't been invited, she said, "Oh, Mom, it was a very informal thing. We didn't want to bother you." But the straw that broke the camel's back was when they decided to move into my house temporarily. "Mom, they're going to paint our apartment, and we need to stay with you for about a month," Grace told me. "Besides, this way we can spend more time together. Don't you think it's perfect?" I was happy to have them close again. I thought we would finally regain the closeness we had lost. However, from the very first day they arrived, things became different in my own house. Richard started complaining about everything, that my TV was too old, that the internet was too slow, that the shower didn't have enough water pressure. "Aunt, this house needs a lot of repairs," he would say. "At your age, maintaining such a big property must be very difficult." Grace started reorganizing my things without asking. "Mom, these plates are too old. I'm going to replace them with new ones," she would say. "And these clothes you have in the closet are so out of style. We should just donate them." Little by little, my house stopped feeling like my house. It was as if I were a guest in my own home. Then the quiet conversation started, which would stop when I walked into the room. I would see them talking in the kitchen, and when I appeared, they would immediately change the topic to something trivial, like the weather or the news. "What were you talking about?" I would ask them. "Nothing important, Mom," Grace would reply. "Just about the house expenses." One night, I heard Richard talking on the phone on the patio. "Yeah, we're already living here. No, she doesn't suspect a thing. Carol says she can have all the papers ready in 2 more weeks." When I went out to ask him who he was talking to, he said it was his boss about a work project. They also started subtly controlling my finances. "Mom, let me help you with the electric and water bills," Grace would say. "You're too old to be worrying about these things." At first, I thought it was a kind gesture, but then I realized she was going through all my bank statements. "Mom, why do you need so much cash?" she would ask me when she saw I had withdrawn $200 for my personal expenses. The most painful thing was seeing how they talked about me when they thought I wasn't listening. One afternoon, I was trimming the plants in the garden when I heard Richard tell someone on the phone, "My mother-in-law is getting harder to handle. She's becoming very stubborn with age." Grace laughed in the background and added, "It's true. Lately she forgets things and gets very difficult when we try to help her." But what really made me open my eyes was when they started making comments about my mental health in front of other people. My friend of many years, Miss Letitia, came to visit, and Grace told her, "Oh, Letitia, my mom has been so confused lately. Yesterday she wanted to go for a walk at 10 at night because she thought it was morning." That was a complete lie. I had never done such a thing. But I saw how Letitia looked at me with pity and concern. "Oh, Margaret, it's a good thing you have Grace to take care of you," she said. In that moment, I felt a deep anger, but also an immense sadness, realizing that my own daughter was creating a false narrative about my mental state. Strange visitors started arriving at my house, doctors who were supposedly there to check my blood pressure, social workers who wanted to evaluate my living conditions, and even a man who introduced himself as a geriatric care specialist. They all came when Grace scheduled them, but they never asked me if I wanted those visits. During one of those evaluations, I heard the doctor talking with Grace in the living room. "Ma'am, your mother seems to be physically fine, but I'm going to note in the report that she shows signs of mild age-related confusion." I was listening from the kitchen, completely lucid and aware, while this man wrote lies about my mental state. The tension in the house became unbearable. Every day I felt more pressure, more control over my life, more hurtful comments disguised as care. "Mom, you shouldn't drive anymore," Richard told me one day. "At your age, it's too dangerous." "Mom, it's better if you don't go shopping alone anymore," Grace added. "We can do it for you." Little by little, they were taking away my independence, my autonomy, my dignity. And the most painful part was that they did it with a smile on their faces, telling me that it was all for my own good, that they loved me so much and only wanted to take care of me. The moment that changed everything forever came that Tuesday afternoon when my world fell apart with a simple technological error that revealed the cruelest truth I had experienced in my 66 years. That day had been particularly difficult. Grace and Richard had left early saying they were going to take care of some work matters, but I knew something was wrong. I had seen them talking in whispers all morning, and when I asked what was going on, they responded with those fake smiles I had already learned to recognize. "It's nothing, Mom," Grace would say. "Just boring stuff about Richard's job." I was left alone in the house, feeling that pressure in my chest that had been growing for the past few weeks. The house that used to be my refuge now felt like a prison. Everything had changed since they had come to stay temporarily. My routines, my spaces, even my way of living had been altered to accommodate their needs and their secret plans. Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I was making chamomile tea to calm my nerves when I heard the notification sound on my phone. It was a voice message from Grace. At first, I thought she was letting me know they would be late, or maybe asking me to prepare something special for dinner. How naive I was to think my daughter still considered me important enough to tell me her plans. I pressed the play button without imagining that in the next 3 minutes, my entire life would be torn to pieces. Richard, I can't take having my mother in this house anymore. Grace's voice began with a tone of exasperation she had never used with me in person. My heart stopped. Those words spoken with such contempt were like sharp daggers piercing my soul. This was not the sweet daughter who would hug me and say, "I love you, Mom," every time she left. She's a total nuisance, Richard. She gets into everything we do, always asking questions, always there. And on top of that, we're already spending so much money on her. I've been looking into some cheap places. I found one on the outskirts that only costs $800 a month. With what we save, we can finally remodel the kitchen we want so badly, and even get new furniture for the living room. Every word was like a physical blow. My own daughter, the child to whom I had dedicated my entire life, was talking about me as if I were a piece of old furniture that needed to be discarded. The $800 the home would cost was exactly what I had been giving them every month for their personal expenses, money that came from my pension and my small savings. But the audio continued, and what came next completely destroyed me. Also, I've already checked all the house papers. It's in her name, but Carol already explained how we can transfer it to our name without her realizing. It's going to be about $500 in bribes and fees, but it's worth it. My cousin already has experience with these kinds of arrangements. In that moment, I understood everything. Carol's casual visits with her folders full of documents, the conversations that stopped when I appeared, the specialists who had come to evaluate my house and my mental state. It had all been part of a meticulously orchestrated plan to have me declared incompetent and steal my property. My house, the house I had built brick by brick, working 12 hours a day for 30 years, the house where I had raised Grace, where we had celebrated her birthdays, where I had cried when she graduated from college, where I had dreamed that one day my grandchildren would play. That house, which was worth approximately $485,000 and represented all my assets, all my future, all my security. I already spoke with the director of the St. Francis home. Grace's voice continued with a coldness that chilled me to the bone. I explained the situation. I told him that my mother has early-stage dementia and that it's dangerous for her to live alone. He was very understanding. He says they see cases like this all the time. I've already signed all the preliminary admission papers. My legs trembled so much I had to sit on the kitchen floor. My own daughter had lied to a stranger about my mental state. She had signed papers to have me institutionalized without my consent, and she was doing it with the same ease with which one plans a vacation. "The plan is perfect, honey," she went on, talking to Richard. "Next Tuesday, we're going to tell her she has a routine medical appointment. We'll take her to the home, check her in, and by the time she realizes what happened, she'll already be inside, and we'll have legal guardianship. Carol says that with the medical reports we got, which say she has mental confusion, it will be very easy to prove she can't make decisions on her own." Those fake medical reports they had fabricated with the help of corrupt doctors, those evaluations I had allowed, thinking they were for my health. It had all been a farce to build a file that would justify taking away my freedom and my rights. Richard could be heard in the background laughing and adding comments that I couldn't understand clearly, but his tone of approval was evident. The man I had welcomed into my family, whom I had helped financially, whom I had treated like a son, was actively participating in the plan to destroy my life. "The best part of all," Grace continued with a laugh that broke my heart, "is that she'll never suspect a thing. She thinks we're the perfect children who adore her. She still says, 'Thank you for taking care of me, honey,' when I bring her breakfast in the bed. If she only knew that I'm giving her that breakfast to keep her calm while I prepare her funeral in life." In that moment, something inside me broke irreparably. It wasn't just the betrayal. It wasn't just the pain of discovering that my daughter hated me. It was the humiliation of realizing that while I blessed her every night in my prayers, thanking God for giving me such a good daughter, she was calculating how many days were left until she could get rid of me. With the $485,000 the house is worth, we can pay off all our credit card debts, the car loan, and we'll even have enough left over to go to Europe on vacation like we've always wanted," Grace continued. "And the best part is, we won't have to pretend to love her anymore. No more Sundays pretending we like her horrible food. No more listening to her repetitive stories from when she was young." Every word was another stab. My food, which I prepared with so much love every Sunday, hoping they would come to visit. My stories, which I told because I wanted to share the beautiful memories of my youth with them and teach them about our family. Everything I thought was love and connection was for them a nuisance they had to endure. "In a month, Mom will be in the home, and we'll own everything," Grace finished saying. "We can finally live in peace without that bitter old woman controlling us. Besides, the life insurance she has is in our name, so if something happens to her at the home, God forgive me for saying this, it wouldn't be so bad." Those last words froze my blood. Not only did they want to steal my house and my freedom, but they had coldly calculated that my death would also be convenient for them. They had turned their own mother into an investment, hoping to gain profits from both my life and my death. The message ended with laughter and comments about what restaurant to choose for dinner that night, as if they had just planned a vacation instead of the total destruction of the life of the woman who had loved them more than anything in the world. I stayed seated on my kitchen floor for I don't know how long, with the phone still in my hand, replaying the message over and over, hoping I had heard wrong, hoping it was a nightmare I was going to wake up from. But every time I listened, the reality became more raw, more painful, more definitive. That night, I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't do anything but walk around my house, looking at every object, every photograph, every memory I had built, thinking that one day I would lovingly pass it on to my daughter. Now, I knew that all of it was going to be stolen, sold, or thrown in the trash without any respect for the memories it represented. But as I walked through my house in the dark of that morning, something began to change inside me. The sadness and pain started to transform into something I hadn't felt in a long time, pure, cold determination. My daughter thought I was a naive old woman who was easy to manipulate, but she had completely underestimated the woman who had raised her. At dawn, I got up with a mental clarity I hadn't had in months. I put on my most elegant crimson suit, the one I kept for special occasions. I grabbed my purse with all my important documents and left the house before Grace and Richard woke up. I had a plan, and they had no idea what was coming. That morning, I woke up at exactly 5 o'clock, as if my body knew it was the most important day of my life. All night long, I had been planning every move, every word, every detail of what I was going to do. I was no longer the naive Margaret who had allowed her own daughter to manipulate her for months. Today, I was going to show Grace that she had completely underestimated the woman who had raised her. I put on my crimson pantsuit, the same one I had worn to her college graduation. I put on my makeup carefully, styled my hair elegantly, and put on the pearl earrings my mother had left me. I wanted to look like the strong, dignified woman I was, not the vulnerable victim they thought I was. Before I left, I wrote a note and left it on the kitchen table. Left early to take care of some personal matters. We'll be back in the afternoon. Love, Mom. I didn't give them any more details because they didn't deserve them. For months, they had made decisions about my life without consulting me. Now, it was my turn to act without giving them an explanation. My first stop was the bank. I arrived exactly when they opened at 8 in the morning. "Good morning, Ms. Baker," said Nora, the manager who had known me for 15 years. "How can we help you today?" "Nora, I need to review all the transactions in my account for the last 6 months, and I want to change all my beneficiaries," I told her with a firmness that surprised her. "I also need you to explain to me if anyone has tried to access information about my accounts without my authorization." Nora frowned as she reviewed my file on the computer. "Miss Baker, I have several inquiries about your account registered here made by your daughter, Grace. She presented a letter signed by you authorizing her to review your bank statements to help you with your finances." My blood boiled. Nora, I never signed that letter. Can you show me that document? When I saw the supposed authorization, I immediately recognized that the signature had been forged. It was similar to mine, but I had never written my name with that slant. This is a forgery, I told her, showing her my ID so she could compare the signatures. My daughter has been fraudulently accessing my bank information. I need you to immediately cancel any authorization she has and put a security alert on my account. Nora turned pale as she realized the seriousness of the situation. Ms. Baker, this is very serious. We are going to cancel all unauthorized access immediately, and I recommend that you file a fraud report. That's exactly what I'm going to do, I replied. But first, I need to protect my assets. I want to transfer all my funds to a new account that only I can manage, and I want to change the beneficiary of my life insurance. For the next hour, Nora helped me secure all my finances. I transferred my $8,750 in savings to a completely new account. I changed all the passwords and named a charitable foundation for abandoned seniors as the beneficiary of my life insurance. Grace was no longer going to see a single cent of my money. My second stop was the county clerk's office where Carol, Grace's accomplice cousin, worked. I arrived without warning with a small recorder hidden in my purse. "Good morning, Carol," I said with a sweet smile. "I've come to check the status of my property. My daughter told me you had been helping her with some paperwork." Carol immediately became nervous. "Oh, Aunt Margaret, what are you doing here? Grace didn't tell me you
were coming." Her hands trembled as she tried to quickly close some documents she had on her desk. "Don't worry, Carol," I said, maintaining my casual tone. "I just want to better understand this insurance paperwork my daughter is doing. Could you explain exactly what documents you need with my name on them?" Carol started to sweat. It's just some preliminary paperwork for a new property, Aunt Margaret," she stammered, avoiding eye contact. "It's nothing important. I'm just helping Grace get a loan." "A loan for what?" I asked, looking at the documents on her desk. "For a new property," she repeated, still not looking at me. "But I have heard that Grace and Richard were having financial problems. Why would they need a new property?" I asked, trying to sound as innocent as possible. My heart was racing. I knew I had to get her to admit what was really going on. "Aunt Margaret, you're not going to understand this," she said. "This is a very complicated legal matter." "Then explain it to me simply," I said. "Because my own daughter and I don't have secrets. Everything she does, she tells me." Carol sighed, as if she were annoyed. "Okay, fine. It's not a loan. It's to transfer the property to her name. She said it's easier for her to get a mortgage if the house is in her name." The cold fury was building inside me. "Why would she need a mortgage if the house is already fully paid off?" I asked. Carol's eyes widened. She realized she had just said too much. "Aunt Margaret, I can't talk about this with you. You need to talk to Grace." "I will," I said, with a smile that was not sweet at all. "Thank you for being so honest with me, Carol." I left the office with the recording of our conversation in my purse, a key piece of evidence that would prove Grace's plan. My third and most important stop was the police station. I went to the Fraud and Elder Abuse Department. I entered with my head held high and sat down in front of a police officer who was busy on his computer. "I'm here to file a report of fraud and attempted elder abuse," I said calmly. "Who are the perpetrators?" he asked, without even looking up. "My daughter and her husband," I replied. The officer finally looked at me, a look of pity on his face, as if he thought I was a confused old woman who had come to waste his time. "Ma'am, are you sure it's not a misunderstanding? Sometimes families have disagreements over money. You should try to talk to them first." "I'm not confused, officer, and I'm not here because of a disagreement. I have proof that my daughter forged my signature to access my bank accounts, and I have a recording where she and her cousin talk about a plan to declare me incompetent and steal my house. I will show you the forged documents and the audio, but first I will tell you the entire story from the beginning. Officer, you will see that this is a meticulously calculated plan to destroy my life."
For the next 2 hours, I told him everything. My life of sacrifices, my daughter's wedding, her financial problems, the fake doctors, and finally the message I had heard. I showed him the forged bank document and played the audio where Grace and Carol spoke openly about their plan. When I finished, the police officer's face had completely changed. His initial pity had been replaced by a look of shock and anger. "Ms. Baker, this is one of the worst cases I have seen of abuse against a family member," he said. "We are going to open a full investigation. We will get an arrest warrant for both your daughter and her husband, and we will contact the district attorney's office to initiate a criminal case against them." "Thank you, officer. I'm not doing this out of revenge, but to defend my rights and my dignity. No one should be allowed to get away with something like this." The plan to get my house back was put in motion, and I felt a sense of relief I hadn't felt in months. My first lawyer's appointment was on Friday. That's when I met David, an expert in family law and property defense. When I told him my story, he was shocked. "Ms. Baker, this is a very strong case. We have the evidence, and we have the witnesses who will testify to the forged documents and the fraudulent evaluations. We will get your house back, and we will make sure your daughter and her husband pay for what they did. This will send a message to anyone who thinks they can take advantage of a family member's trust." It felt like justice was finally on my side. But the truth is, I was still hurting deeply from the betrayal. The love I had for my daughter hadn't disappeared, but it was now overshadowed by a pain so profound that it consumed me. When I went home that evening, I sat alone in the living room, in my house that was now just a piece of property, and I cried. It was a kind of crying I hadn't done in a long time. It was a release of all the pain, the sadness, the humiliation, and the anger. I cried for the relationship I had lost with my daughter. I cried for the life I had built with her, and I cried for the woman I had become. The next day, I received a call from David. "Ms. Baker, I have some news. Your daughter has contacted me. She wants to negotiate." My heart started to race. "What does she want?" I asked. "She wants to offer you a deal. She wants to give you the $485,000 for the house. She said she wants to settle this without going to court, and she wants you to forgive her." Forgive her? After everything she had done? For the rest of the day, I thought about the conversation with David. I could take her money, sell the house, and start a new life. I could also forgive her, but I also knew that forgiveness would mean giving up the truth, and giving up the truth would mean giving up my dignity. I called David and I told him, "I will not accept her offer. I will not give up the house that I built with my own hands, and I will not give her a single cent of the money from the sale. I will make sure she gets what she deserves." That evening, Grace called me, crying hysterically. "Mom, please don't do this. I'm sorry. I love you." "Don't you dare tell me you love me," I said with a voice that was as cold and hard as stone. "You don't know the meaning of the word love." I told her that she would never get my house, my life, or my forgiveness. "I will see you in court," I said, and then I hung up the phone. A week later, I received another call from David. "Ms. Baker, your daughter has accepted the deal. She will sign all the papers to transfer the house to your name, and she will pay all the legal fees." I felt a sense of victory, but it was bittersweet. On the day she signed the papers, I met her at David's office. She looked old and tired, and her eyes were empty. When she tried to hug me, I held up my hand and said, "Don't you dare touch me." "Mom, please," she said. "Don't you see that I'm sorry?" "I see that you're just trying to get out of trouble," I said, "but you're not going to get away with this." The next day, I received a call from David again. "Ms. Baker, your daughter has signed the papers. The house is officially in your name again." That evening, I sat in my living room, in my house that was finally mine again. I opened a bottle of wine, and I toasted to my new life, to my future, and to all the women who had the courage to defend themselves. I raised my glass of wine, and I thought of all the women who at that moment were suffering from the mistreatment of their own families, believing they had no options, that they had to endure abuse for the sake of family love. If my story could reach just one of those women and give her the courage to defend herself, then everything I had gone through would have been worth it. Because sometimes the greatest inheritance we can receive is not money or property, but the courage to be true to ourselves and the knowledge that it is never too late to write a new chapter in our lives. It is never too late to choose dignity over convenience, truth over false peace, and self-love over destructive sacrifice. And it is never, ever too late to be free.